Imagine waking up tomorrow and never needing to eat again. Not because you're fasting, not because you're sick, but because your body simply doesn't need it. No hunger, no cravings, no malnutrition. You can stare at a buffet or a burger or a box of your favorite snack and feel absolutely nothing. Now multiply that by 8 billion. Every grocery store closes. Every kitchen falls silent. Every restaurant abandoned. In a matter of days, the entire planet's most ancient ritual becomes obsolete. But if humans don't need food anymore, what collapses first? And what rises in its place? Food has been at the center of human life since the beginning of time. It built civilizations, started wars, launched economies, inspired religion, created community, and fueled every cell in your body. But now, it's gone. Or rather, the need for it is. This isn't a post-apocalyptic famine. This is evolution, or technology, or something else. Nobody knows what triggered it, but overnight, humans are free from the chains of consumption. No more calories to count. No more dinner tables to gather around. No more farming, fishing, hunting, or cooking. At first, it feels like a miracle. Global hunger ends instantly. No more starvation. No more food shortages. No one's hoarding or stealing bread. It's the ultimate equalizer. But then, supermarkets go bankrupt. Entire economies implode. Cultural foundations begin to crack. The ripple effect is fast, relentless, and bigger than anyone imagined. First to fall. The multi-trillion-dollar food industry crumbling under the weight of a world that simply doesn't need to eat. The first shockwave hits the global economy like an extinction-level event. In one surreal instant, the food industry, a towering behemoth responsible for feeding the world, becomes utterly obsolete. No warning, no phase-out. Just a hard stop. Farmers abandon their crops mid-harvest. Livestock are left in their pens, not out of cruelty, but because they're no longer necessary. Meat, milk, vegetables, grain, none of it holds any biological value anymore. No one's buying, no one's eating, no one's hungry. Within 72 hours, shelves across global supermarkets remain fully stocked, not because of abundance, but because no one's shopping. Fast food chains like McDonald's, KFC, and Starbucks shutter overnight. Fine dining collapses. The once sacred culture of eating, where billions of lives and livelihoods converged, flickers out like a dying flame. Now, zoom out. The food industry isn't just about food. It's agriculture, it's packaging, it's refrigeration, transportation, warehousing, marketing, and manufacturing. It's insurance, investment, chemicals, tech, and logistics. And it's one of the largest employers in the world. Nearly 1 in 3 humans work in a food-related job, whether it's tilling soil, preparing meals, or analyzing supply chains. Now, they're all unemployed. Mass layoffs trigger a global unemployment crisis within days. Corporate giants lose trillions in valuation. Stock markets plunge. Banking institutions scramble to recalculate risk in a world where the single most stable commodity, food, has zero demand. Governments reel. Entire ministries dedicated to food, agriculture, nutrition, and safety are dissolved. Global food aid programs gone. School lunch subsidies erased. Even billionaires with food empires. Those who once controlled everything from soda empires to frozen dinners find themselves powerless. Their influence depended on human appetite. And now, that appetite no longer exists. But here's the twist. While some celebrate the end of hunger, others spiral into confusion. Culinary artists, chefs, bakers, and food lovers mourn the loss of their craft. Not because they can't survive, but because the meaning behind food has vanished. And if food loses its meaning, what happens to the land, the oceans, and the animals we once consumed to survive? With humanity's hunger permanently silenced, Earth's most heavily used resource, land, suddenly becomes free. Fields that once stretched endlessly with golden wheat, soybeans, corn, and rice are now purposeless. There's no market, no demand, no future harvests. Tractors rust in silence. Irrigation systems shut down. Farms that defined entire nations are abandoned, slowly overtaken by weeds, vines, and silence. And livestock. The ethical debate explodes instantly. Billions of animals bred solely for food, chickens, cows, pigs, fish, now exist without purpose. Factory farms become ghost towns. Slaughterhouses close forever. The meat industry, worth over $1.3 trillion, evaporates in a flash. Some argue to release the animals into the wild. Others push for sanctuaries, unable to stomach mass euthanasia. But resources, once tied to feeding humans, are drying up. Now that food isn't needed, who decides what lives and what fades? Meanwhile, the oceans breathe again. No more industrial fishing fleets dragging nets across the seabed. No more bycatch. Overfishing, plastic-packed supply chains. Global fish populations, long pushed to the brink of collapse, begin to recover. Coral reefs revive. Aquatic ecosystems rebound at a pace not seen in centuries. And on land, something remarkable unfolds. Nature moves in. Vast agricultural regions in the US, Brazil, China, India, and across Africa begin to rewild. Crops are replaced by trees, grasses, and native species. Deserts shrink. Rivers that were once diverted to irrigate crops begin flowing freely again. CO2 emissions from agriculture plummet. The planet itself seems to exhale, but new tensions rise just as quickly. What do we do with all this land? Corporations eye the newly freed territories for data centers, factories, luxury developments, and energy infrastructure. Some governments propose turning these areas into mega solar farms or reforestation projects. Others move to claim unused farmland as territory for expansion, triggering political disputes and land grabs. Land that once grew food now becomes a battleground for the future, both environmentally and politically. And then there's culture. Entire rural towns built around farming lose their identity overnight. No more harvest festivals. No more planting seasons. No more generation-spanning traditions passed down through soil-stained hands. Children born into agricultural families now grow up with a question their ancestors never asked. If we don't need to grow food, what do we do with the earth? But the collapse of agriculture isn't just physical, it's emotional. Because for thousands of years, food wasn't just survival, it was celebration. And now, humanity must learn how to live without it. Across the globe, something strange begins to happen. Not riots, not rebellions, but grief. Not for lost lives, but for lost meals. Because food was never just fuel. It was memory. It was tradition. It was love. Think about birthdays without cake, weddings without banquets, holidays without feasts. Thanksgiving becomes just another Thursday. Christmas dinners are replaced with awkward group silence. Eid, Diwali, Lunar New Year, emptied of the very thing that once brought families together. Restaurants, already shut down economically, are now spiritually abandoned. Dining tables gather dust. Recipe books are shelved like forgotten relics. Generations of culinary wisdom. How to roll the perfect sushi. How to ferment kimchi. How to simmer a perfect sauce. All of it becomes obsolete in a single generation. The emotional collapse hits hardest in the kitchen. Grandmothers mourn not being able to pass down the family's secret stew recipe. Parents feel unmoored without the evening ritual of family dinners. First dates lose their magic. Breakups have no tubs of ice cream. Even religion falters. Sacred meals like the Eucharist, Ramadan, Iftar, and Passover Seders lose their symbolic weight. What does fasting mean if hunger is no longer a test of faith? What does breaking bread mean in a world with no appetite? And in this vacuum, humanity scrambles to fill the void. Some try to recreate mealtime traditions without actual food. Gatherings emerge, ceremonial, ritualistic moments where people sit together not to eat, but to pretend. Plates are set. Utensils are lifted, but nothing is consumed. Others turn to virtual reality. Digital dining experiences simulate taste and texture, an artificial fix for nostalgic cravings. You can taste a pizza or sip a vintage wine in a fully immersive environment, even if your body doesn't process it. Meanwhile, a new generation emerges, one that never knew hunger. To them, food is ancient history, something primitive, a concept from the before times. And with that mindset, social dynamics begin to shift. There's no such thing as a picky eater, no shared cravings, no mukbangs, no cultural food taboos. Cuisines fade from identity. National dishes disappear from global conversations. But not all is lost. In the ashes of culinary culture, something new rises, a deeper appreciation for presence. Instead of bonding over meals, humans bond through shared creation, storytelling, immersive experiences, or biosensory rituals unrelated to consumption. Celebrations shift from what's on the table to who's around it. Because even in a world where no one eats, people still hunger for connection, for purpose, for belonging. And as the cultural foundations crumble and rebuild, the global balance of power is shifting too. Because without food, the political and economic map of the world is being redrawn. The collapse of food doesn't just gut industries, it redraws the global map. Nations once considered agricultural superpowers, like the United States, Brazil, China, India, Australia, and Argentina, suffer a catastrophic identity crisis. Their dominance was tied to what they could grow, harvest, and export. Now, their greatest asset, land, has no strategic value. Vast wheat fields, cattle ranches, rice paddies, and fishing zones once drove international trade, foreign diplomacy, and food security alliances. Now, they're liabilities. Expensive to maintain, vulnerable to rewilding, and politically useless. Meanwhile, countries that were once vulnerable due to food scarcity, small island nations, desert states, mountainous territories, suddenly find themselves on equal footing. Geography no longer dictates survival. Climate doesn't matter. You don't need arable soil to thrive. You don't need water access for agriculture. Every nation now starts from zero. This creates a domino effect of instability. Trade collapses. Shipping industries grind to a halt. Global ports, once lifelines of wheat, meat, spices, fruits, and grains, become ghost stocks. Entire economies centered around food export vanish. Stockpiles rot. Commodities like corn and soy lose all monetary value. The World Trade Organization, irrelevant. The UN's World Food Program, disbanded. International treaties that once stabilized food prices and famine response are archived as historical artifacts. And with no food, no famine, and no scarcity, nations lose one of their most powerful tools of negotiation: leverage. Foreign aid no longer includes food relief. Sanctions that once restricted grain exports or embargoed agricultural supplies are meaningless. Even warfare shifts. Historically, invading armies starved populations, seized food reserves, or burned crops to weaken enemies. Now, hunger can't be weaponized. But power vacuums don't stay empty. Tech-focused nations begin rising. Those with expertise in bioenhancement, sustainability, virtual experience design, and clean energy start replacing old agricultural hegemons. Think South Korea, Estonia, Singapore, Sweden. Nations that were never dominant food producers now become new centers of influence. We also see an unexpected political movement: the returnist agenda. A growing faction believes that needing food was essential to human discipline, motivation, and humility. They advocate for voluntary hunger simulation, engineered biodependence, and even genetic reversion to pre-foodless biology. Their slogan, "To eat is to feel. To feel is to live." Meanwhile, global economies scramble for new foundations. Banks that once gave billions in agricultural loans collapse. Food currencies used in barter economies become worthless. Real estate prices plummet in formerly food-rich rural zones and skyrocket in areas with tech infrastructure. New wealth emerges in the form of experience. Companies begin monetizing time, attention, virtual pleasure, and synthetic bonding. Feast simulations become a luxury service. Digital flavor portfolios are traded like NFTs. Food becomes art, abstract, nostalgic, symbolic. And all the while, traditional nation-states weaken. Without the pressure to feed their people, governments lose one of their fundamental responsibilities. Citizens start questioning, if survival is guaranteed, what do we need a state for? Freed from the biological demands of hunger, humanity now faces a new question. What do we live for, if not to survive? With survival off the table, literally, humanity is left to confront a question it's never truly asked at scale. If we don't need to live, why choose to? For millennia, human activity orbited around nourishment. We hunted, gathered, farmed, traded, cooked, fasted, feasted, and fought, all to satisfy hunger. That instinct powered economies, drove innovation, shaped religion, and influenced every form of art and storytelling. But now, with hunger gone and food meaningless, billions wake up in a world without a biological clock. No breakfast, no lunch, no dinner. Time blurs. Daily structure, once wrapped around eating, crumbles. And with it, the motivation to do anything. At first, there's freedom. Unimaginable freedom. No more food insecurity, no more meal prep, no more grocery bills, no more diet culture or calorie counting. But freedom without direction is a paradox. And soon, many spiral. Without the daily ritual of eating, some feel unanchored. Work feels optional. Schedules collapse. People wander through their days without rhythm, without urgency. Some even forget to hydrate, mistakenly associating thirst with the same hunger that's vanished. Psychologists begin documenting a global condition, post-sustenance drift. A form of existential lethargy triggered by the erasure of need-based purpose. But not everyone drifts. For others, this is an awakening. Without the pressure to feed themselves or others, humans begin reinvesting in neglected pursuits. The arts experience a renaissance. Music, storytelling, immersive theater, and virtual exploration take center stage. People begin to live curiously, not urgently. Creative expression becomes the new nourishment. Projects that once seemed impossible due to time constraints, massive collaborative sculptures. Real-time augmented reality cities, AI-generated symphonies, are now born and completed with no need for breaks, meals, or physical rest tied to digestion. Even science sees a supercharged acceleration. Freed from hunger cycles, researchers spend longer hours in labs and fieldwork without burnout. New breakthroughs in space colonization, consciousness mapping, and synthetic biology emerge at blistering speeds. And with no global hunger crisis, humanitarian efforts shift. Volunteers who once delivered food aid now build schools, terraform deserts, design learning pods, and develop empathy-based AI to support mental health. Humanity's moral compass adjusts too. Without scarcity, generosity becomes more genuine. Charity isn't about handing out meals. It's about sharing attention, mentorship, time, and care. A new mantra spreads through societies. To nourish is no longer to feed, but to inspire. Education systems evolve. Children no longer learn about food pyramids or caloric intake. Instead, they're taught emotional regulation, creative mastery, ecological stewardship, and philosophical resilience. Even cities adapt, with no need for restaurants, grocery stores, or fast food outlets. Urban planning is reimagined. Entire districts are reallocated for experience zones. Public art, sensory gardens, story domes, and collaborative maker spaces. The planet becomes a playground of potential. But the most profound shift happens internally. People begin asking, if I'm not living to survive, what makes life worth living? Some explore spiritual depth, seeking connection beyond the physical realm. Others dive into legacy, creating, building, teaching, exploring, not for reward, but for meaning. The end of food becomes the beginning of intention. But even in this new golden age of purpose, something lingers. A shadow of the past, because without hunger, some humans feel they've lost the very thing that made them human. For all its promise, this new world without food carries a strange, invisible burden. Because while the body no longer hungers, the mind still does. Hunger was more than biology. It was emotion. It was anticipation. It was comfort. It was a language. Without it, people begin to feel ungrounded. Cravings don't just vanish overnight. The brain, hardwired by evolution to find joy and flavor, still fires the same reward circuits when it sees a chocolate cake or smells fresh bread, even if it knows it doesn't need them. A bizarre form of nostalgia sets in. People report phantom hunger, a sensation that something is missing, not in the stomach, but in the soul. They crave meals not for sustenance, but for meaning, for the memories, the laughter, the sensory richness that once anchored their lives. A new disorder appears in medical literature: culinary displacement syndrome, psychosocial condition where individuals feel disconnected from identity due to the absence of food-based rituals. Support groups form, not for overeating, but for the grief of not eating. People gather to share stories of their last meals. Entire online archives are built to preserve humanity's culinary heritage. Artists begin creating edible sculptures meant never to be eaten. Museums open dedicated to the history of the meal. And in the darkest corners, something even stranger emerges. There are those who want hunger back. Not just the craving, but the pain. Some simulate starvation through virtual environments. Others inject neural chemicals to mimic the feeling of deprivation, just to feel something. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because it reminds them they're alive. In response, a black market of artificial hunger emerges. Neurotech devices that trigger simulated cravings become trendy among youth subcultures. They call it feeling vintage, a rebellion against the sterile perfection of foodless life. Meanwhile, couples report intimacy struggles. Dates without dinners feel flat. No more romantic cooking. No more flirty cafe chats. No shared wine. Just talk. Some adapt. Others don't. Therapists see a surge in existential consultations. Clients say things like, "I feel full, but I'm empty. I don't want food. I want meaning. I miss needing something." To compensate, new rituals emerge. Tactile dining experiences where people gather to pretend to eat, choreographed down to the chewing. Others turn to emotional meals, shared sessions of storytelling, memory sharing, or synchronized breathing, mimicking the connection once found over shared plates. And still, the question lingers. Was hunger part of what made us human? Because without that primal pull, without that daily reminder of our limits, our instincts, our shared need to survive, something sacred has gone quiet. So in a world where food has vanished from necessity, identity, and culture, what are we really left with? In the beginning, food was everything. It was survival. It was community. It was pleasure. It was identity. It was war, peace, trade, culture, faith, love, and life itself. To eat was to be human. To share a meal was to say, "I see you. I care about you. I want you to live." But in this new world, where no one eats, no one hungers, and no one needs, humanity has been unshackled from its oldest instinct, only to discover how much that instinct once held us together. Yes, the planet healed. Yes, wars ended. Yes, poverty disappeared. But something quieter was lost. The rituals, cravings. The small, unspoken moments between bites. The taste of love served warm. The flavor of memory. And while new traditions rise, new meanings form, and new paths forward unfold, the human heart remembers. Because even in a world without hunger, we still hunger. For connection, for ritual, for something to gather around. Not because we must, but because we choose to. And maybe, just maybe, that choice is what being human was always about. If this made you pause, if it made you reflect, then this channel is for you. Hit like if you found yourself picturing life in this strange new world. Subscribe to uncover more realities you never thought to question. And tap the notification bell, because the next scenario might just challenge what you believe is normal. We explore the worlds that could have been and the ones that still might be. So ask yourself, if this is what happens when food disappears, what happens when time breaks, when truth dies, when reality rewrites itself? Stick around. The next reality is waiting.